Homeless at 18, I built a cabin on my father's neighbor's farmland. Then something strange happened. My name is Lisa Thomas, and when I was 18 years old, I learned that losing your home and losing your family are not always the same thing. Sometimes you can lose a house and still have people who love you. And sometimes you can be surrounded by relatives and still be completely alone. I didn't understand that distinction until the year everything in my life fell apart. Before I tell you what happened, subscribe to the channel and stay with me until the end of the story, because what started as a homeless girl's desperate attempt to survive on the edge of a farm ended up saving lives during one of the worst storms our county had ever seen. Even now, years later, I still get emotional when I think about it. Because the little cabin everyone laughed at wasn't supposed to matter. It wasn't supposed to become important. It certainly wasn't supposed to change anyone's life. But sometimes the smallest things end up becoming the biggest blessings. And that's exactly what happened to me. My father was a farmer. Not a rich farmer. Not a famous farmer. Just a hardworking man who spent his life working the same Missouri soil his father had worked before him. Our farm wasn't large, but it was beautiful. Rolling green fields stretched beyond the house. A small creek wound through the western pasture. An old red barn stood beside rows of oak trees that seemed older than the county itself. When I was little, I believed that place would always be home. I believed my father would always be there. I believed family meant forever. Then my father died, and within a year I discovered how wrong I had been. The funeral wasn't even 6 months behind us before arguments began. Relatives I barely knew started appearing. Lawyers got involved. Documents were discussed. Property lines were examined. People who hadn't visited my father in years suddenly seemed very interested in what he left behind. At first, I thought everything would work itself out. I was naive. The truth is, grief sometimes brings out the best in people, but money often brings out the worst. By the time I turned 18, most of the farm had become the center of a bitter family dispute. The adults kept saying they were doing what was fair, but fairness never felt like it included me. One evening, after another argument that lasted hours, my aunt looked directly at me and said something I'll never forget. "Your father isn't here anymore, Lisa. You need to accept reality." Reality. I hated that word, because their version of reality seemed to mean pushing me out of the only home I had ever known. A few weeks later, that became exactly what happened. I packed my clothes into old boxes, loaded them into my father's pickup truck, and drove away. 18 years old. No house. No savings. No plan. Just heartbreak. I remember pulling over beside the road that first night and crying until I couldn't breathe. The world felt enormous, and I felt impossibly small inside it. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just break your heart. It makes you question everything. You start wondering if any of the love was real, if any of the promises mattered, if family really means what people claim it does. For weeks, I drifted from place to place, sleeping in the truck, taking temporary jobs, trying to convince myself I was stronger than I felt. But the truth was simple. I was scared, terrified actually. Every day felt uncertain. Every night felt longer than the last. Then one afternoon, everything changed. I was parked near the edge of my father's old property when somebody knocked on the truck window. I looked up, and there stood Robert Walker, my father's neighbor. Robert had owned a farm bordering ours for nearly 30 years. He was a tall man with silver hair, rough hands, and the kind of weathered face that only comes from decades spent outdoors. Standing beside him was his wife, Martha. They had known me since I was born. I remember Martha looking at me through the window and immediately knowing something was wrong. Mothers have a way of seeing things people try to hide. She opened the passenger door and sat down beside me. Then she hugged me. No questions.
No lectures. No judgment.
Just a hug. And I completely broke down. I cried harder than I had since my father's funeral. Because for the first time in months, somebody made me feel like I wasn't alone. After listening to my story, Robert sat quietly for a long moment. Then he said something that changed my life. There's an unused section of our property near the north field. If you want a place to stay, you're welcome to use it. At first, I thought he meant temporarily. A few days, maybe a week. But Robert had a different idea. You know how to work, he said. You know how to build. Then he pointed toward a wooded section of his land. Why don't you build yourself a cabin? I stared at him. A cabin? He nodded. Small, simple, strong. And sometimes, when someone believes in you before you believe in yourself, amazing things happen. The next morning, we started clearing the site. The location sat near the edge of a wooded area overlooking open farmland. Tall oak trees provided shade. The ground sat slightly elevated above the surrounding fields. A small gravel path connected it to the main farm road. It wasn't much, but to me, it felt like possibility. For months, I worked. Every spare dollar went into materials. Every free hour went into construction. I learned how to frame walls, install windows, build a roof, lay flooring. There were days when I was exhausted. Days when I questioned whether the effort was worth it. Days when rain delayed progress and money ran short. But every time I considered giving up, Robert and Martha encouraged me. Not with money, not with handouts, with faith. The kind of faith that tells someone they're capable even when they can't see it themselves. By autumn, the cabin was finished. It wasn't large. One bedroom, a small wood stove, a kitchen area barely big enough for a table, a front porch overlooking the fields. But it was mine. The first night I slept there, rain tapped softly against the roof. The wood stove glowed warmly in the corner. The smell of fresh pine filled the air. And for the first time in over a year, I felt safe. I thought the cabin story ended there. I was wrong, because 2 years later, a storm arrived that nobody in the county would ever forget. The weather forecast warned about heavy rain, then stronger rain, then severe flooding. But forecasts rarely prepare you for reality. The storm began overnight. Wind howled across the fields. Lightning flashed so frequently the sky seemed permanently illuminated. Rain hammered the roof like thousands of tiny hammers. By dawn, roads were flooding. Creeks were overflowing. Fields had become lakes. I spent most of the morning checking on livestock and monitoring conditions. Then I received a frantic phone call. It was Martha. Her voice was shaking. Robert had taken several family members into the far section of the property earlier that morning to move equipment before floodwaters reached it. Now they were stranded. The access road had disappeared beneath rushing water. Visibility was terrible. The truck couldn't safely cross back. And the storm was getting worse. My heart immediately dropped, because I knew exactly where they were. And I knew exactly what stood between them and danger. The cabin. Without wasting a second, I grabbed supplies and headed toward the north field. The rain felt like buckets of water being poured from the sky. Mud covered everything. Wind bent trees nearly sideways. It took far longer than usual to reach the area, but eventually I saw them. Robert, 2 grandchildren, his son, his daughter-in-law, cold, vet, and trapped. When they spotted me, relief flooded their faces. I led them through the storm toward the cabin. The moment we stepped inside, everything changed. Warmth, shelter, safety. The wood stove roared to life. Dry blankets appeared. Hot coffee was made. The children curled up near the fire. Outside, the storm continued raging. Inside, everyone was protected. For nearly 18 hours, we remained there while floodwaters covered much of the surrounding farmland. The little cabin held strong. The roof never leaked. The walls never shifted. The foundation never failed. Then he said something I'll never forget. Funny, isn't it? I looked at him. What is? He glanced around the cabin. The thing built to save one homeless girl ended up saving all of us. Nobody spoke for a moment, because we all knew he was right. Had the cabin not existed, the situation would have been very different. Much more dangerous. Potentially tragic. Instead, there we sat. Safe.
Together.
Family. Not by blood.
But by choice.
And honestly, those are sometimes the strongest families of all. Today, when people ask me how I survived losing everything at 18, I tell them the truth. I didn't survive because I was strong. I survived because people chose kindness when they had every reason not to. I survived because a neighbor became a friend became family, and a simple cabin became a blessing nobody saw coming. The relatives who pushed me away taught me what betrayal feels like. But Robert and Martha taught me something far more important. They taught me what love looks like. And every time I sit on that porch watching the sun set across those same fields, I remember a simple truth. Sometimes God closes one door so you can discover the people who are waiting to open another. And sometimes the home you lose is only leading you toward the family you were meant to find all along. If you enjoyed my story, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who believes kindness doesn't matter. Because one act of kindness built a cabin, and one cabin changed everything. As for me, I still live in that little cabin today. The porch is older now, the trees are taller, and the fields stretch just as beautifully toward the horizon as they did the day I first arrived with nothing but a broken heart and a few boxes in the back of an old truck. Sometimes life doesn't give us the family we expect, but it often gives us the family we need. I lost a home, but I found people who loved me. I lost certainty, but I found purpose. And I learned that even the darkest season can lead to blessings we cannot yet see. If you've listened to my story all the way to the end, thank you for spending this time with me. I hope life brings you good health, peaceful days, and people who stand beside you when the storms come. And if you're facing a difficult chapter right now, don't give up. The road ahead may be hard, but your story is not finished yet. Sometimes the most beautiful parts of our lives begin when we think we've lost everything. May your fields be fertile, your home be warm, and your heart be filled with hope. God bless you, and until we meet again, take care of yourself and those you love.